apologize for the vote and for a phone conversation I had to have at a certain hour that I didn't hear your presentations. And like Senator Hawley, I'll probably have some questions to submit in writing when my time runs out. So I'm going to start with Judge Chun. In law school, you wrote an article praising the 1960s as a time, quote unquote, of revolutionary courts. You also said those courts drew from sense of social justice to establish strict liability and tort as a standard of defective products, end of quote. Will you follow that approach and draw from your sense of social justice if you're confirmed as to serve as a federal judge? And I hope you consider that a friendly question. I just want to know where you're coming from.
Thank you for the question, Ranking Member Grassley. I appreciate it. So the rest of that article, as I recall it, it's been a long time since I wrote it. The rest of that article, I believe, supports the risk utility test. And so it talks about the history of the development of product liability law back in the 1960s, and then talks about its development into the modern age. It supports the risk utility test. That's my recollection. I can assure you, Senator Grassley, that when I have a case before me, including a product liability case, I would apply the law to the specific facts of the case before me.
Okay, and then another question for you. You were a trustee for the King County Bar Association in 2013. That year, this bar association proposed changes to the Washington Bar's rule of conduct. The proposal specifically created a safe harbor for cases where lawyers solely violate federal law. The change was prompted by a state law. That state law was on marijuana, but the proposal was much broader than just that. Three simple questions, I think they are. Did you support the proposed rule change? If you can't remember, I'll ask you to answer in writing.
I cannot recall. I was relatively new to that particular board, so it had already been being discussed when I joined it.
Okay. Since you didn't know, then maybe I ought to ask you to answer these other two questions in writing.
I'd be happy to do
But
so.
if you did, why should it be okay for an attorney to violate federal law? That'd be one. And third, why did you think it was acceptable for an attorney to advise a client? But if you can't remember, then I'll take your answer in writing.
Thank you.
Okay. Then for Mr. Fleming, maybe you've gotten so many questions you don't want another one. Anyway, you have had extensive experience working as a federal public defender. But as a federal district judge, you will need to handle both civil and criminal cases. If you're confirmed, how would you plan to get up to speed on civil cases?
Thank you for the question, Senator. First, I would note that my practice over these 30 years initiated as a civil practitioner. And at that time, when I was offered the job with the Federal Defender's Office, I had to make a very complex and relatively quick transition from the civil world to now understanding federal criminal law, federal mandatory minimum sentencing, and the U.S. sentencing guidelines as they were then. And as you know, in 1991, the guidelines were new and were mandatory. So I had a lot of learning to do in a relatively short period of time. I'd like to believe now, 30 years later, that I had some success with doing that. And I also am confident that if now called upon to transition back to a situation where I am now handling civil work or civil related matters again, that I can make that transition easily and well. To further answer the question with regard to how I would do it, I would just note that I don't intend to be an island. I will have a staff that will assist me, clerks, law clerks who will assist me. And to the extent that my background may not be as extensive in civil as it is in criminal, I think it's going to be important for me to have law clerks who have a strong civil background so that we can balance out that knowledge and that skill set and be prepared to handle any of the matters that come before me if I'm so fortunate to be confirmed.
Okay, since I only have 6 seconds left, I'm going to submit to the other two nominees questions for response in writing. So I hope you'll answer them as soon as you can.